caucusing with Andrew Weaver.
I was.
It's awesome that we could have her here, and unfortunately she won't be able to be here this evening, but we will enjoy her for lunch. And, well, we'll enjoy her speech for lunch.
Lightly toasted and grilled.
So in 2009, Elizabeth May and I got to know each other. She spent an evening at our house with my mom and my sisters and the other parts of our family. And it was at that moment that we knew that we had to do everything we could to ensure that Elizabeth May was our next MP. And since then, and I guess it's been 7 years now that Elizabeth and I have known each other, our relationship has grown strong, and it's been an honor to have Elizabeth May representing the Saanich territory, and it's an honor to have her here today. Everybody, please give a rousing and warm welcome to the MP of Saanich Gulf Islands, Elizabeth May!
Thank you. That's really, really sweet of you. That's terribly sweet. And I mean that because being leader of a Green Party anywhere in the world is really challenging because Greens, by our very DNA, don't like the idea of having a leader. And so getting a standing ovation from Greens it means much more than in other parties where people are like that kind of thing. And I'm not, and when I say this, I was actually thinking about the fact that, and of course all of you know it, there's some people here from the news media, so I want to emphasize, of course, that the Green Party of Canada and the Green Party of British Columbia have exactly the same relationship as the Green Party of Canada has with the Green Party of New Zealand, or the Green Party of Germany, or the Green Party of Sweden, or the Green Party of Nova Scotia, and so on. Or the Green Party of Metro Vancouver. We share values, but we don't share an organizational structure or a constitution or have any top-down relationship at all, either within the individual parties or between them. So Andrew Weaver is my colleague and my, en français on peut dire mon homologue, n'est pas un mot pareil en anglais. He is my equal partner in the Green movement. But what this really is, and when you all stood then, I was just thinking, this is family. And every year when I go to the climate negotiations, there is a tradition at the climate negotiations where, you know, we're there once a year at every COP, whatever's going on. And there's a tradition started by the Global Greens. They organize what's called the Green Family Breakfast. And the Green Family Breakfast is where last year I met Carolyn Lucas, my friend who is the only Green Member of Parliament in the UK Parliament, thanks to Andy Shadrack for going out and campaigning for Carolyn. And that's where I was with my friend Ursula Romson, who's just had to step down, but she was Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden and co-leader of the Swedish Greens and Minister of the Environment, Sweden. But the relationship, I love the fact that they call it the Green Family Breakfast. And what we do when we get together for the one morning that we can all set aside time to be together in wherever the climate negotiations are happening that year is we exchange intelligence, because we're actually working together in the corridors all the time. But it is a family relationship. We share values, and I see in this room some of my favorite friends in the world, like Joanne Roberts, who should be with me in Ottawa, and I miss her every single day. I miss her. I really wanted Joanne there with me so much. And I wanted Glenn Solid there with me so much it hurts, and Paul Manley, and Fran Janucci, and Francis Littman. What a terrific, extraordinary, Brenda Sayers. Vancouver Island's Green candidates were so spectacular, but so too were our candidates across the country, coast to coast to coast. Amazing candidates. So we are family, and the next challenge for our family is in British Columbia in spring of 2017. And we know it's coming up, and it doesn't matter if you're a federal Green or a provincial Green or a city Green or just someone who likes voting Green. This is the time. I just was talking to Daphne Taylor. Daphne, I don't want to embarrass you, darling, but we've known each other forever. And let's say you're a little older than me. And Daphne said, next election, I'm going to tell all my older friends, this time, you have to vote Green before you die. I don't know if that's going to be a thing, like a slogan we really want to embrace. We will do whatever we can, as much as we can, to make sure that Andrew Weaver is leading a caucus of Greens in the BC legislature, and why not? Given what's on offer, really what British Columbia needs is Premier Andrew Weaver. And here's why. I want to dive into some substance. Some of you will know that Globe and Mail isn't my favorite paper in the world, but I think it's important to stay up on mainstream media because something extraordinary is happening, and only Andrew Weaver's been saying the truth about our energy future. And that is that our energy future means we're going off fossil fuels rather rapidly. We have to. And what's interesting is the extent to which our mainstream press has been ignoring the developments globally. Very few people reported that about a month ago, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia announced, how many of you have already heard this? The Crown Prince of Saudi, you've heard a lot of you. Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia announced that by 2030, Saudi Arabia would cease being dependent on oil. Wow. Yeah. So, and here we are in Canada, where we have this kind of parody of politicians of every stripe who repeat mindlessly this mantra: we must get bitumen to tidewater. I don't know who invented this phrase, we must get bitumen to tidewater. I think it was a very expensive advertising agency that used focus groups to say what sounds like we're sensible business people and uses words that normally people don't use in conversation, like we must get bitumen to tidewater. And I challenge them on it because it's a complete nonsense. Why must we? Exactly. We must get raw resources shipped out here as fast as possible for jobs in other places? That's what you mean? We must get raw logs out of BC as fast as possible. We must get bitumen to tidewater. It's insane. It's really economic nonsense. So when I find myself picking up today's Globe and Mail and finding that the economy section of today's main opinion page, Doug Saunders of the Globe and Mail has written, headline, "Is Canada ready for a world awash in $0 oil?" And he's referring to a draft federal government study leaked to the CBC this week, prepared by the Government Trend Forecasting Office, Policy Horizons, makes the case that oil may be on the verge of becoming almost worthless. Wow. Yeah. So it goes on from there, and he says, there have been similar stories. About a week or so ago, there was a story about shareholders at an ExxonMobil shareholders meeting demanding more transparency to know how much of the value of this company, I've got my investment locked up in your company, how much of the value of this company is worthless? How much of it is unburnable carbon? This is now making it into the business pages. And we need a wake-up call for the other parties in this province that going for LNG is not just a prescription for environmental disaster and a fracked north and more earthquakes and contaminated groundwater, it's a prescription for bankruptcy. We need to be clear about the economics. And so here's another little point here. Oil investors are calling, this is today's slogan now, oil investors are calling on energy companies to start selling off their assets, paying out their investors through dividends, and preparing for the end. Yeah. Paul Sankey, oil industry analyst with New York's Wolf Research, told an energy forum in Calgary this week, quote, demand forecasts are way too positive. Really, the essence of the opportunity for oil is to be dividend stocks to pay out, not to attempt to grow, but actually to orderly liquidate. As the Audible report notes, goes on Doug Saunders, quote, this plausible future would suggest that governments ensure that the risks of further investments in oil and gas infrastructure be borne by private interest rather than the taxpayers, close quote from a federal government study. Doug Saunders also notes we're probably going to be grateful very soon that pipeline projects haven't gone ahead because they would have become, quote, they soon would have turned out to be massively expensive stranded assets. And he closes, Canada is luckier than many countries. Only half of our export revenues are tied up in resources. This is an industry that is on the verge of liquidation. And your premier and our premier thinks that we should be going for LNG and fracking. And we're told by everybody and their brother in Ottawa, well, we have to approve one of those pipelines because we have to get bitumen to Tidewater. Thank you for joining in on that. I tell you, some days I feel as though, well, you know the days I have in Ottawa where I just think, kids, can we all get along? But the fossil fuel industry is on its way out. And we have to be concerned about Canada's economy and the opportunities that are there for us as a country, luckily not dependent on these exports very much. And I think we have to be thinking about win-win solutions. I'm going to be talking tomorrow, as I mentioned, to the mayors of Canada. And I've got two mayors that I think so highly of them as individuals. Gregor Robertson in Vancouver and Don Iveson, who many of you won't know, who's the mayor of Edmonton. One of the finest guys I've ever met. But in today's media, they're being pitted against each other. Gregor Robertson heading to Ottawa, I'll be working with him later this week with First Nations leaders and saying no to Kinder Morgan, N-O in big letters, no. You read the National Energy Board report, and having been, by the way, the only interveners in the National Energy Board Kinder Morgan process who showed up and worked our asses off through that horrible sham of a process to present a final argument that could actually convince anyone open to reason that Kinder Morgan's pipeline project, the Trans Mountain project, is an unmitigated disaster. I can tell you the only 3 people with any political credentials who showed up, the only 2 elected people other than mayors who opposed the project, the only MLA for British Columbia to show up to argue against Kinder Morgan was Andrew Weaver. The only MP was me, and Adam Olson was there on behalf of Sartlet First Nation and his own interests as an individual Sartlet person with rights under the Douglas Treaty. If you haven't watched those yet, watch the testimonies that we 3 gave to the National Energy Board. So here's Gregor Robertson coming back to Ottawa to say, no goddamn way should this cabinet approve Kinder Morgan. And then my friend Don Iveson, whom I hold in highest regard, said, yes, but Alberta needs help, and we have to have export routes for our product. We need really quickly to come up with some win-win solutions, because Alberta's economy needs help. They need help now, they needed help with the price of a barrel of oil plummeting. And here's the theory for why the price of a barrel of oil plummeted. We all know the proximate cause. Saudi Arabia flooded the market with cheap oil, and ours is uncompetitive. That's what happened. The business pages at the time speculated, well, Saudi Arabia is just trying to get more of the market and drive Bakken shale from the US, horrible sourced gas. That's what blew up and killed so many people in Lac Mégantic. Bakken shale, by the way, is completely unsafe by rail. This may shock you, but the safest way to move bitumen, if you wanted to move it, is by rail, because if you don't mix it with diluent first, it's virtually inert in a train. But anyway, nobody nationally in our news media bothers to ask the question, what's in a pipeline, what's on a train? They just make these massive generalizations. Pipelines must be safer than rail. Look what happened in Lac Mégantic. Well, okay, Bakken shale and Lac Mégantic, a disastrous product, but like oil sands crude, oil sands bitumen, unconventional. As soon as you put an "un" in front of conventional in discussing fossil fuels, same as fracking, as soon as you have unconventional natural gas, unconventional crude, what you've got is higher costs, greater greenhouse gas emissions, and a more dangerous process. Just flat out. So Saudi Arabia flooding the market with their conventional oil drove the price of a barrel of oil down and made it impossible to make a profit on a barrel of oil or bitumen or Bakken shale. Why did they do that? Now the pages of the business pages at the time said because they just wanted to get market advantage. They're planning for an orderly liquidation. Yeah. They're getting rid of their unburnable carbon while the getting's good. That's a much more coherent explanation for what Saudi Arabia just did. And it's continuing to flood the market with cheap oil and continuing to get rid of the stuff. And we would have stranded assets if we continue to invest
in expansion of pipeline projects. What we need to do is figure out how to help Alberta process bitumen at home in Alberta and create jobs there. And we need to do it fast because people in Alberta and the economy of Alberta, and frankly, we're not, I'm a very nonpartisan leader, and I really want to help Rachel Notley. I don't want to see Alberta go back in the blue column. I'd like to see Rachel Notley, who's done an exemplary job in helping the people of Fort McMurray through the disaster of that fire. We have to figure out as Greens and as federal politicians, and for that matter, as climate activists, what do we do to help Alberta so that we can nix the plan? You can't call it a climate plan. The current Alberta Climate Action Plan is to go from 70 megatons a year from the oil sands to 100 megatons a year. That's not a climate action plan that's coherent with avoiding and consistent with avoiding 1.5 degrees global average temperature increase. So on climate issues, bar none, Andrew Weaver and the BC Greens are the only ones who are talking common sense. We're not the ones who are unreasonable. We're not extremists, we're realists. Getting off fossil fuels is not only a climate imperative, the market has kind of decided. And that's really interesting. So we have to get out ahead of that, and we have to expose in the next election that not only is fracking disastrous for the environment, and not only is liquefied natural gas not a solution to China's carbon footprint, liquefied natural gas from Canada's fracked fields has a bigger carbon footprint than coal. So let's get over these attempts to guilt trip British Columbians that we can help them in China get rid of coal. That's not the agenda here. And we have to make sure that Petronas's project on Lalo Island is turned down flat, and that we get a revisiting of the wood fiber Squamish approval and get that turned down flat. And no way are they putting a floating LNG terminal in the Saanich Inlet. No way. Just been out in front on all the climate issues. Who showed up when the people of Shawnigan Lake were saying to the Department of Environment provincially, you're contaminating our water? They said, no, we're not. Nothing like having a scientist show up with test tubes to test the water to say, kinda you are. Toxic waste is getting into the water. It's Andrew who showed up and did that. Or how about when teachers were going to go out on strike? Andrew didn't make any fuss about it, but he was the only MLA actually trying to avert a strike, working behind the scenes. Or what he's done on sexual harassment and abuse on campus, which the government adopted and said, okay, we're going to bring that bill forward. And I really do think, and I haven't checked this with Andrew first, I hope I'm not going out on a limb here, but we must, as a party, federally, provincially, municipally, we must do something soon about the destruction of Vancouver by foreign investment and money laundering. The insanity of the Vancouver housing situation is now here on our doorsteps and changing our market and our access to affordable housing in Victoria. It's time to do what other jurisdictions have done and say yes. We put limits on foreign investment. We put taxes on properties that are vacant. We don't let these people continue to buy properties and pay no taxes. You know, it's one of the great federal studies that I quoted in the House when I was fighting for letting Syrian refugees in. That refugees coming to Canada within a number of years are paying more tax than the people who came in the $1 million investment category. Because they actually live here. And they go to work. And they start paying taxes. Sooner than, now that $1 million investment program has been changed federally, but there's still a big loophole going on within Quebec. We have a lot of work to do. So another challenge for all of us before the next election is to make sure that British Columbians know that yes, we're the party of reason and common sense, and we will protect our coasts, and we will defend our salmon, and we will stop Kinder Morgan, and we will protect British Columbia's future bank account from the red ink of this lunacy around natural gas. But we're also paying attention to social well-being, to healthcare, to education, to affordable housing. That we're the choice you want when you go to vote, because we're people who will always put the public interest ahead of partisan advantage. And we don't care about trying to say, we can score a point in the media today to make ourselves look good by making the other guy look bad. We're the kind of people who know that we all look better when we all do well and we embrace each other and pull out the best of what's possible from all the other people that we work with in a legislature or in a parliament. That's what makes policy come around to good conclusions, like what happened this week when Nathan Cullen's motion was accepted by Mariam Monsef. That really happened in real life. And I can tell you, there were a bunch of media people a week earlier, and I told them, oh no, we're gonna fix this because I'll get a vote on the committee. He's like, sure. Yeah, right. Like the Liberals are gonna give up their majority on that committee. It's amazing how quickly people who think things like that can't happen because they're quite confident that their cynicism is never going to fail them as a value system. When it's proven wrong, they retreat to, well, yeah, they only did that because they got you later, or as Scott Reed, who is a very knowledgeable and impressive Conservative member of Parliament, who's their Democratic Reform critic, he got up in the House and accused, he said, well, I know what's going to happen. There's going to be some deal between the Liberals and the Greens. You know, it's so there's a level of skepticism and cynicism that defies sense. So the other thing I'm just going to say before I close and take some questions, because I told Adam I thought that was a good idea. We're not just a party about issues and policies, and this is hard to do. We have to be a group of people and community activists and citizens who are prepared to say out loud, we actually believe it's possible that good things will happen. We are optimists. We have faith and hope and are willing to believe that good will triumph. Basically, that's it. You know, David Korten, an economist from the US who's done a lot of work around globalization, said years ago, we're no longer in a conflict between communism and capitalism. We're in a fight between life and money. That's what we're on about. That's what stopping Malahat LNG is about. That's what stopping Kinder Morgan is about. That's what protecting our wild salmon is about. All of these fights, in their essence, is a struggle between life and money. And the stakes are too high to give in to cynicism or despair. The stakes are whether our kids have a livable world. My kids, Silas and Ella, Andrew's kids, all of our kids are the people we work for. And when you're working for people like that, who have their hopes entrusted to us as grown-ups to do the right thing, there are a lot of young Greens in this room, and thank God you're here. I'm so thrilled to see so many young people. We have to be the people who are brave enough to say out loud, call me naive if you want to, but I think Justin Trudeau will end up doing all the right things. We have to push him, but it could happen. Call me naive if you want, but I think the people of British Columbia could decide to embrace a positive vision for their future and elect a whole lot of Greens in May 2017. Thank you very much.